Welcome, everyone. My name is Jess Posner. My pronouns are she and they, and I am the director of the virtual Y at the YMCA of Central New York. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the first virtual speaker event this October, featuring our guests, Barb Romeo and Kathy Miller from the American Cancer Society. As your host, I'd like to welcome you and acknowledge that though we are coming to you virtually and accessible to anyone in the world with access to the internet, the YMCA of Central New York does exist as 8 locations and 3 camps located in and around Onondaga County in New York State, which stands upon the unceded, occupied traditional ancestral lands of the Haudenosaunee Indigenous peoples. I'd also like to offer a description of myself visually. I'm a tall, larger-bodied, queer white woman of mixed European and Jewish heritage. I'm wearing a sort of like black and white and red plaid sweater, and the background behind me is a bookshelf and some happy plants. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. The YMCA of Central New York is honored to share a variety of virtual and in-person activities and resources to educate our community and support those impacted by this disease. Here at the Y, we strive to support all of our members in body, mind, and spirit at all stages of life and recovery. We hope these resources will be supportive to survivors, those who care for them, and all people looking to learn more about breast cancer. This month, our programs include live virtual seminars with expert community partners from the American Cancer Society like tonight, as well as the Hematology-Oncology Associates of CNY and Upstate Medical University, in-person programs from Lori's Hope Breast Cancer Survivor Support Group, a special virtual restorative yoga class, and other video resources available on our virtual Y platform. For more information about all of our programs this October, you can visit ymcacny.org/BCAM2021, and I'll put that in the chat for you. For more information about our ongoing Lori's Hope Breast Cancer Survivor Support Group, you can contact Sue Montmany, and I will put her contact information as well as mine into the chat once we get started. We'd like to let you know that we are recording these events and we'll be uploading them to our YouTube channel and Virtual Y website in the coming weeks. Any publicly shared version of these videos will only include the visual feed of myself and our featured speakers. We will also have time for a Q&A tonight, so please feel free to enter any questions into the chat, and I'll read those out to our guest speakers at the appropriate time. So without further ado, I'm going to spotlight our speakers tonight.
Thank you. Hi, everybody.
And I'm going to, and before you start, Barb, I want to go ahead and read your bios. So I'm going to do a little bit of a formal introduction for our 2 guests tonight. First, we have Kathy Miller, who received a Master's of Education in Counseling and Guidance from the University of Arizona and spent the majority of her career working in the prevention field, working with topics such as alcohol and drug abuse, bullying, sexual abuse, and HIV/AIDS. She worked in public school settings, county government, and nonprofit organizations in Arizona, California, and New York. For 18 years, she served as the program monitor for the Alcohol Drug Abuse Prevention Education Program administered through AOCNP. Since retiring in 2018, she has continued to consult with AOCNP and to do volunteer work with the American Cancer Society and Interfaith Works. Kathy is a 6-year breast cancer survivor, and one of her goals is to provide support and accurate information to other women with similar diagnoses. Barb Romeo has been with the American Cancer Society since 2009 and currently holds the position of Director of Development for Upstate New York. After graduating from SUNY Oswego with degrees in philosophy and psychology, Barb began her career working at Onondaga County Department for Social Services. After a few years off to raise her 2 young children, Barb re-entered the workforce at the Rape Crisis Center of Syracuse, which later merged with Vera House, managing a volunteer sexual assault crisis response team. Barb feels very grateful for the variety of experiences her different roles have brought her. She resides in Baldwinsville, New York, with her husband Manny and dog Ellie. She has 2 grown children, both working and residing in the New England area. So Barb and Kathy, without further ado, the Zoom stage is now yours.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to start and just give a couple of brief comments. Hang on while I share my screen. Jess, it says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Try again.
Okay. Here we go. Okay, so as I was planning out my comments, which are going to be brief, I don't want to overwhelm everybody with statistics and talk about all the many things that we have going on in the fight, in the space of the fight against breast cancer. But I am going to give you just a couple of stats and hope that you walk away with a couple of things. There's a reason that we have so many events and so many things going on in the breast cancer space. For the first time, breast cancer has surpassed lung cancer as the most commonly diagnosed cancer in the world. That's big. That happened just in 2020. Mm-hmm. It is a widely diagnosed cancer. I don't know anybody anywhere who doesn't know somebody who's been impacted by breast cancer. One of the things we do at the American Cancer Society is research. I think most people know that. We have a lot of money currently invested in breast cancer, 76 million, and have invested 56 million in just metastatic breast cancer research since the 90s. What's good news is that the death rate has dropped by 41% since 1989 to 2018. And that is due to our early detection and screening things that we've put in place. Right now, we have another newer crisis because there was a significant decline in screening rates due to the pandemic. So one of the things that I'm really hoping that you walk away with tonight is get screened, get screened, get screened. Tell your friends, your family to get screened. These are our screening guidelines. I'm not going to read them all to you. You can look them up. You can find any of this on cancer.org. But do know that for anybody, if you know somebody who doesn't have health insurance, we do partner and work with other agencies that will get you a no-cost or low-cost mammogram, including the Upstate Cancer Center, which has a mammo van. There are just many ways. And if you don't know what to do, you can always call cancer.org. One of the other things I want you to know is we do have many events that raise money specifically for breast cancer. And our largest in this area is coming up in just a little over a week. On the 17th of October at Clinton Square is our Making Strides Against Breast Cancer Walk. If you know a breast cancer survivor, if you feel like coming and just supporting the cause and being there, it's a pretty powerful thing to be at, seeing all those people in the same space supporting the survivors. So it is Sunday the 17th at Clinton Square. If you just Google Making Strides Against Breast Cancer Syracuse, you'll get the website and all the details. And lastly, I'm going to turn it over to my esteemed colleague, Kathy Miller. And just anecdotally, Kathy and I met at the Rape Crisis Center of Syracuse many years ago when we were both working there. She worked there when I started working there. And then we reconnected. Gosh, Kathy, what, 3 years ago?
Yes, I think, yeah.
Yeah. At our Syracuse office when Kathy was there attending a volunteer training, and I just stuck my head in to thank them. She recognized my name. Mm-hmm. And now she sits on my Syracuse board of advisors and is an integral part of that amazing group. She does many things that she's going to tell you about, but one of the services that we offer that we want to highlight today is Reach to Recovery. And I'm going to turn it over to Kathy now.
Great. Thank you, Barb. I thought I'd get started this evening by just telling you a little bit about my cancer experience, and then I'll lead into how I got involved with the American Cancer Society as a volunteer. So back in March 17th, 2015, a date I will probably never forget, I was diagnosed with early stage breast cancer. And that started for me a year of various treatments. Even though my breast cancer was early stage, it was stage 1A. And it was estrogen and progesterone positive because it was something called HER2 positive. And if you don't know about this, you don't have to know. I know that you're going to have some of these programs done by medical experts, and they probably will explain this sort of thing to you. But anyhow, because I had the HER2 positive mutation, that made my cancer a little bit more aggressive, which meant that I needed chemo in addition to surgery, radiation. So in my case, as I said, my diagnosis was March 17th, and we made the decision to start chemo right away. I was having genetic testing done at the time because my mother had died some years earlier from ovarian cancer. And so the surgeon thought it was a good idea for me to have a whole huge panel of genetic tests done to see if there was anything there related to ovarian cancer and breast cancer. And I did not, at that point, I don't know if it still works this way or not, but at that point, it took up to 6 weeks to get the results back of those tests. And during that time, I really didn't want to be doing nothing in terms of treatment. So the doctor said, well, lots of times we can do chemo for a person first before we do surgery in the hopes that that will shrink the tumor. And remember, in my case, it was already a very small tumor, that they would shrink it further and then the surgery would be less extensive. So that's what we did. We started chemo in April, and somewhere in there, my results came back, and fortunately, I did not test positive for any of the genetic tests that were available at that time. So that means the 2 BRCA genes, and there was a whole host of other tests. So I had 6 chemo treatments over the course of 18 weeks, so every 3 weeks. And, you know, I will be honest about this. Chemo was very tough. There were a lot of unpleasant side effects for me. And for, you know, the whole range of treatments that I've had, chemo was definitely the hardest. So that continued until July of that year of 2015. Then I had a little break from treatment. And in September, I had a lumpectomy, and I had something called the sentinel node biopsy, which is where they take one lymph node from under your arm and biopsy that. And if there's no cancer there, then the assumption is made that it hasn't spread to other lymph nodes. So you don't have to have any other lymph nodes taken. So in my case, there was very good news. Well, the first piece of good news was that the chemo had shrunk my tumor. So, I mean, it was small to start out with, a matter of, millimeters, and it shrunk so far that the only way they could tell that it was even there was because they put in a little titanium marker when they do the biopsy. So I had the lumpectomy, I had the sentinel node biopsy. That was negative, which was great news. And so I was sent home to recuperate from the surgery. And after about 6 to 8 weeks of recuperation from that, I started radiation in November. I had radiation every day for 5 or 6 weeks. And by the way, I should mention that I was still working at OCNP at this point, and I continued to work throughout my treatment. During chemo, I had to take some time off here and there, depending on how I was doing. But during radiation, I scheduled my radiation in the morning so I could go before I went to the office. And then in December, I started something called an aromatase inhibitor. So that's something that suppresses estrogen in your body, that's given to women like me who have tumors which are estrogen or progesterone receptive. And that's to decrease the estrogen in your body so that hopefully that will help prevent a recurrence. So that's an oral pill. Meanwhile, I also, because of that genetic mutation that I talked about earlier, the HER2 positive, after I finished chemo, I was still having an infused drug called Herceptin every 3 weeks. And I continued with that up until April of 2016, at which point that was ended. And so from that time until the present, the only treatment that I'm on is the oral drug that suppresses estrogens. My cancer has been in remission this whole time. I slowly recovered from the side effects of the various treatments. And, within another few months, I was feeling pretty much myself again. I had sometime in the fall, I had returned to exercising at the Y. I will say I was a member of the Y, the East Area Y, before my cancer diagnosis, and I regularly went there. And I heard about a program, and I think I believe, Jess, it's the one called Laurie's Hope that provides a full year's membership to cancer survivors at the Y. So I applied for that and I was approved for it. So when I went back to the Y, I had a full year, which was wonderful. During that time, on my own, I met with a personal trainer who had some experience in working with breast cancer survivors. And she designed a program for me that, really fit my particular body. I have some other issues. I have a fused disc in my neck and some arthritis and some other things. And so that was really good for me to kind of give me a kickstart on exercise again. Exercise is very important because research has shown that it is both preventive of breast cancer, and for survivors, it can help to prevent a recurrence. So as I said, I was committed to exercise before my diagnosis, but I was even more committed to exercise after my diagnosis. So life went on. And then I decided that I was going to retire from OC&BOCES at the end of the school year. So that would be June 2018. And as I got closer to my retirement date, I decided that I really wanted to look ahead and start doing some volunteer work. And, as I was doing some research on that, one thing that I kept reading about that really appealed to me was the program Reach to Recovery through the American Cancer Society. So I applied for that and I was accepted. And first, I'll just tell you a little bit about what Reach to Recovery is. So it's a program that connects people facing breast cancer with trained volunteers who are also breast cancer survivors. So the women that sign up for it, they can be any point along the way, from an initial diagnosis, going through treatment, survivorship themselves. And this program provides volunteers that give one-on-one support to talk about side effects, to talk about sources of accurate information. One thing we do not do, however, is to provide medical advice because we are not medical providers. So I signed up for, to be a volunteer, and there was an extensive, actually that was an online training program, which I thought was really well done, including role playing, which we did as we got further along in our training. And then we were trained to use the system. And, I took on my first case. And at that time, Reach to Recovery, so that was in 2018, Reach to Recovery was all done pretty much on the phone. You could have a way to do an online chat, but the system paired up people like me, the volunteers, with people who were seeking services. So I didn't have anything to do with who was assigned to me, and they could not request a certain person. And, you know, I saw the first 2 years, I don't know, I saw people maybe every couple of months I got paired with somebody. During COVID, things changed with the American Cancer Society. Barb could tell you way more about that, but a lot of the programs needed to change. And one thing that was done was they created a new platform for Reach to Recovery. And in this system, and I'll show you a sample of it in just a minute, the people who are seeking the services now, they sign up, they do a profile of themselves. Meanwhile, people like me who are volunteers, we create our own profile. And then the person looking to receive the service, they pick from us. So for me, this has worked way better. And most of the people, the volunteers I work with, say that it works better because they can fine tune it and find some breast cancer survivor that's been through an experience very similar to what theirs is, similar diagnosis, that sort of thing. Like sometimes in the past, before this new system came on, I would be paired with somebody who had a mastectomy, for example. And I didn't have a mastectomy, I had a lumpectomy. So it was hard for me to provide the kind of support that that person really needed. Now, when I get a request from somebody, usually the person is having treatment that's very, very similar to what mine was. And sometimes their life circumstances are even similar to mine, like maybe their age. Before, sometimes I got paired with somebody who was like in her 30s or 40s. And you know, getting a breast cancer diagnosis at 30 or 40 is very different than it was for me. I was 60 when I was diagnosed. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you the page of my profile. And if I can find it, let's see.
Kathy, I also dropped in the chat the Reach to Recovery program flyer. It's a one-pager.
Okay.
It does a good job outlining it.
Okay. All right. So this is what the page looks like when a person comes to join it. And then you develop a logon. This is my logon, both volunteers and peers. And so the page that you're looking at now is a page for us as volunteers. So it talks about breast cancer information. We were trained extensively in information, resources in our own community and online. And then these threads here are things that people are looking for in specific. But I wanted to show you my profile. So here it's, you know, I have a photo of myself and it gives my email address and my where I reside in New York. And then you check off all of these things. So what I had was invasive ductal carcinoma, and it was HER2 positive, hormone positive. I had surgery, chemotherapy, radiation, hormone therapy, other treatment. For me, that means I did different kinds of alternative treatment also. Surgery was a lumpectomy, no reconstruction. And then additional information, I put in my age at diagnosis, what the year of diagnosis was, whether or not I had children under the age of 18 at the time of diagnosis, which is no. I have one daughter, but she was 24 at the time when I was diagnosed. And then I can choose if I'm willing to do an online chat, talk by phone, or just exchange messages with somebody. And the messaging is pretty similar to email, except we use this system. People don't email me at my private email address just for, you know, security purposes. I didn't mention too, this whole service is free and confidential through the American Cancer Society. And then tell a little bit about yourself. So in this, I won't read you the whole thing, but I just say that my mother died from ovarian cancer. And actually this part has been important. At the time that I was initially diagnosed, my daughter, my only child, was had finished college and was living in France for a year teaching ESL. And that was very challenging because in the early stages, we decided not to tell her because we wanted to wait until we had full information about what my treatment was going to look like, because we imagined that once she heard about this, she would choose to come home. And her assignment in France started in September and went through May of 2015. And my diagnosis was in March of 2015. So anyhow, she did choose to come home early, but only 2 weeks early. So that worked out well. And then I just give a little bit of other information about myself, why I decided to do this, which is, for me, it was my way of trying to give back in some way, because so many people were helpful to me when I went through the experience, and I wanted to do the same thing. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing that now. Let's just see if there, I'll look at my notes to see if there was anything else I wanted to cover. I think that's pretty much it. I would be, I'm happy to talk about anything else or to answer anybody's questions, either about my personal experience with breast cancer or about my experience with Reach to Recovery. Just thought of one other thing. After I had volunteered for Reach to Recovery for maybe 6 to 8 months, I decided that I also wanted to do more with the American Cancer Society. So I volunteered for another program that they offer called Road to Recovery. And that is where volunteers who may be cancer survivors like me, but they don't have to be, provide transportation for people with a cancer diagnosis to their various appointments. So I signed up for that too. And again, we had training, and I did that right up until COVID, and then that program was put on hold for obvious reasons, and we have not started it up again. But I hope that when we do start it up again, when everything is safe, I'll get back to that, because I found that to be a very rewarding program. And I drove people with all kinds of cancer diagnoses. I just drove in Onondaga County, but to all kinds of places where they had appointments. And I really got to know the county, I have to say, by trying to find people's homes and then trying to find all their medical appointments. So I think that's it from me. Like I said, I'd be glad to answer questions.
Thanks so much, Kathy. Such a generous offering. I'm going to go ahead and add both Kathy, Barb and myself back in. And I want to invite anybody who has any questions to either put them in the chat, or we're a small group today, so you can unmute yourself if you'd like to ask any questions or come up with anything that you'd like to have either of our guests, Kathy or Barb, speak to. But I have a question for you, Kathy, that maybe we can get started with. Sure. I'm curious to know how you sustained your spirit through treatment and your diagnosis and that experience.
Well, it was very challenging. And if you had run into me during chemo, I would not have looked or acted like I'm acting right now. It was, it was a real challenge to me. I had, lots of support from my husband and my daughter when she came home. My sister, who lives in another state, came here to be with me for the first chemo treatment and during my surgery. I have a wide circle of friends. They were here for me in a lot of ways. And unfortunately, I think because I'm of a certain age, I have a number of friends who had already struggled with breast cancer. And so, we kind of have a club, so to speak. I think that I tried to cultivate an attitude of gratitude. My cancer was found very early stage. There was never a point at which, to hear the words, "You have cancer," it's pretty devastating. It's a life-threatening illness. And I knew that because of people I've known and because of my mother's ovarian cancer. But everybody that I came in contact with, my surgeon, my oncologist, all the people at the cancer center where I went, were very upbeat about my prognosis, and that helped. And I literally did the thing too, where I crossed off days on the calendar during the chemo, because I thought that I was going to get a cancer diagnosis. I had a symptom and I thought this is going to come back bad. And so I wasn't surprised when I got the cancer diagnosis. I was very shocked and taken aback when I heard that it was HER2 positive, meaning I would need chemo, because the surgeon had said early on, "Oh, that tumor is so small. I'm pretty sure we're going to be able to get it with just surgery and radiation." But then that mutation changes things. And there are good treatments. In fact, my oncologist, the first time I saw her, she said, "Well, I know it's bad news that you have cancer, but the good news is that if you're going to get breast cancer, this is a good kind to get, because we have a treatment for every part of your breast cancer. Unlike somebody who has something like triple negative breast cancer, where yes, there are treatments, but not targeted towards those specific treatments." So I just, tried to keep those things in mind. I did, I also made the decision that anything that was offered to me in terms of treatment or support services, I was going to access. So like I went to Hematology-Oncology. I know you're going to have a speaker from there later on. They have a whole range of services there, social work. They have a physical therapist, and support groups. And I tried everything at least once. I didn't stick with everything, but I tried everything. And I had a mentor through, I didn't do Reach to Recovery, but they had a program there, a mentorship program, which is very similar to Reach to Recovery. And I signed up for that. So I spoke with someone on the phone who had been through breast cancer many years. She was a real veteran. She had been through it a long time before. And I think all of that gave me hope. So, like I said, there were very many challenging times, and I shed plenty of tears, and I felt depressed. But I used a lot of self-talk with myself. So it's a long-winded answer to your question.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate your honesty and candor and generosity.
Sure.
That question. Barb, I have a question for you, if you're open. You very briefly mentioned the role that ACS plays in research. So I was wondering if you cared to speak a little bit more about how, if folks wanted to learn more about that, or how to get involved, or just sort of like find more information about the cutting edge research that ACS is supporting, or, developments that have happened because of that research. I would love to learn more.
Yeah, and great question. And if I could just piggyback on something Kathy said first, I just want to point out that I think the feeling that Kathy described is very common. And what Kathy is doing in Reach to Recovery is really offering this support system, this club that she said she has, to everyone else. And I just love that it's being so widely used right now. And I can't speak enough about how great I think it is to connect people like that. Research is just something we're pretty good at. We are the #1 private funder of all cancer research. We have a lot going on in the breast cancer space. I didn't pull the stat. I am terrible at remembering stats, which is why I didn't want to inundate people with them. We have multiple grants in New York State that are active on breast cancer. We currently are funding 76 million in breast cancer specific research across the country. So that's just current grants. You can find out pretty much anything if I wanted to know anything about cancer, I would go to cancer.org. I mean, if we have a family member diagnosed, anything that you want to find, we have a great search engine. I can't say enough about it. It's a great website. There's live chat. There's a 24/7 phone number. So that's where if you wanted to know more, that's where I would go. But I'll say this, and I don't say this lightly. I love the American Cancer Society. I've loved every place I've worked for. We walk the walk, and we have been a part of every single major cancer breakthrough for the last 110 years. So I think that the treatments that is in every practice, the preventative measures, the screenings, the treatments, they all come back to some research that we funded generations ago. So, I mean, what we're funding now is going to help, my kids' kids. So I hope that answers your question. I don't have specifics. I mean, we have doctors that really know a lot more about research in the department than I do. But I hope that at least answered your question a little bit.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for directing us to those resources.
Can I just piggyback on that? We're going back and forth on each other. The website, it really is a wonderful website. And when I was diagnosed, the nurse navigator in the surgeon's office said to me, she said, I think I already know you well enough to know that you're going to go home now and you're going to go on the internet and you're going to look up everything that you possibly can about breast cancer. And I said, yeah, that's right. And she said, well, I'm going to caution you against that because there are lots of good sources of information and there are lots of bad sources of information, and people scare themselves. They freak themselves out when they get this kind of a diagnosis because, not everything you read will be accurate. And breast cancer is not one disease, it's many diseases. And so if you read something about the kind that is not yours, you're not getting the information that you need. So I resisted my urge to look at anything and everything. And she had a couple of good websites that she gave me. And then when I was training with Reach to Recovery, we went over that whole topic again. The only website I give to people is cancer.org because I feel like if they need something that is more specific, they can get that from their doctor or their nurse. But cancer.org, I was just on the website today for some other reasons, and it is so extensive in terms of, any kind of cancer and all the services provided by American Cancer Society, but the research, like you were saying, Barb, so it is one that is, anything that's on there is vetted before it's put on there. And that's really important because getting bad information is worse than having no information at all, at least in my opinion. So.
There was a question in the chat to me, and I'm just going to answer it here if I could. Yes, we have, the question is regarding traveling to a medical facility that's not in New York State. Absolutely, cancer.org and the 800 number is a resource, but let me tell you some of the things we do have. We have Hope Lodges near most of the major cancer centers. The closest one to us is in Rochester, and it is reopened. It reopened at the end of September. It was a huge thing because they all shut down during COVID. So, as did all Road to Recovery programs. we have a huge focus in the program space. Our focus is access to care. So that includes rides and lodging. So depending on depending on where the treatment is, like I said, there's quite likely a Hope Lodge near there. And if there's not, we have partners with hotels. So it's either going to, and they are either no cost or low cost, but the way into all of that is through the 800 number. I hope that answers the question. And as far as cost, I mean, Hope Lodges are free, and children are not allowed, but adults are allowed with one caretaker, and they're wonderful. I mean, there isn't a person that stays at a Hope Lodge that doesn't say how wonderful it is. So yeah. Did that answer your question?
I can attest to how important it is to have a nice place to stay. I was fortunate in getting all of my treatment here locally in the Syracuse area, but I did decide at one point to get a second opinion, and I chose Dana-Farber in Boston, and that was before I hooked up with you, Barb, at the American Cancer Society. So I did not know anything about Hope Lodges or hotels or anything like that. Dana-Farber has a connection with a hotel that's right on their, literally on their campus, that does, if you're a patient there, they give you a discount on the rooms. But I had a few friends who had to travel regularly for their treatment, which I did not. And it is, it just adds another whole stressor to what is already an extremely stressful time in people's lives, because I think about, when I had chemo, I lived 20 minutes from where I had it. So when I was finished, I could come home and lie down and in the comfort of my own bedroom, and how much more challenging it would be to be maybe in a strange city, and then also worrying about how much it costs, because your health insurance does not cover things like that. I have excellent health insurance. I have no complaint at all about how health insurance covered me during my all of my cancer treatment, but it does not cover things like transportation. So.
Thank you both so much. Do we have any other questions from anyone who joined us tonight? If not, I would love to both thank you, Barb and Kathy, for your candor and your generosity in sharing this. I personally have both breast cancer and many other forms of cancer in my family. So it is empowering to know that there are these resources, and also to know that survivors are so generous in how they continue to give back to the community, to provide that sense of community and family and clubness of probably one of the worst experiences of many people's lives. So I wanted to just thank you for continuing to share that and to make that visible, so that we know that it's there for when we may need it. And then finally, I just wanted to ask if either of you had some closing thoughts that you want to leave us with tonight.
Do you, Kathy?
I'll let you go first while I think for a minute.
And I don't. Let me just leave you with this thought, and it's about our 800 number. It's about our services. And it's a story I heard in the time period that I've been at ACS, and it might bring tears to my eyes because it's quite moving. And I heard this from a staff person. I think it happened in the Midwest, and the staff person was working directly with this family. So it's a true story. We have our 800 number, which is like, you give that to people and they think, it's an 800 number. It's not just an 800 number. It's a really, really great hotline. So here's the story. There was a mom that was diagnosed with cancer, and she had a young son. And the teacher in his school knew what was going on. So she kept trying to check with him and say, like, just want to check in, how you doing? And he seemed okay. And he kept saying, I'm doing okay. I'm talking to my friend. So the teacher accepted that, and it happened a couple more times. And she became very curious who this friend was that he was talking to. And she had, was working with talking to the parents and everything, and nobody seemed to know. So she asked him, one of the times when he said, no, I'm talking to my friend and I feel better. And so she asked him who his friend was, and it was our 800 number.
Oh.
So, I mean, quite something that a young child got the number, used it, and was talking to somebody, I think several nights a week.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'll leave with that story.
That's a great story. I think the thing I wanted to leave you with is that, when I decided to start volunteering, my goal was to be helpful to other people who were going through something similar. But I got to tell you that it's really helpful to me. I mean, and I've heard people say this about so many things, but it really is true. I get as much as I give, and sometimes more. That was especially true when I was driving people who, without me, they weren't getting to their appointment, and that meant their treatment was not going to be able to proceed the way that it was supposed to. And I can't tell you how many times people would say to me, and these were people who, by and large, did not have many financial resources, but they'd be in the car with me and it would be time to get out. And they would say, can I give you something? Can I give you money towards gas? And I would say, no, you can't. I'm doing this because I want to do it. But to me, that was just to see that appreciation. And it just brought it home to me how much a need this is for people, like I said earlier, medical care, health insurance, it only goes so far. And people need a human touch. And I think, through the volunteer work that I do, everything I do through the American Cancer Society, that's what we're providing. So I'll leave you with that.
Well, thank you both so much for your generosity and for this really beautiful evening. And thank you to those of you who are here with us tonight for witnessing, for your questions, and for being part of our community and NY family. So I just wanted to say thank you so much to everybody that's here tonight, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.